You and I need to understand the purpose of God's rules. Why is that rule in the Bible? Why is that principle there? We need to understand what some people term the spirit of the law. We, of course, understand the letter of the law and exactly what it is that God is commanding. But what exactly is the spirit? What's the purpose of the law? And when you do not understand the purpose or the spirit of a principle or a rule, what will happen is that you will find yourself following the letter of the law, doing exactly what it says, and yet breaking the very spirit of the law. And this is exactly what the religious leaders were doing in Jesus's day to the Sabbath commandment. It is the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. It is one of those 10 commandments. And so, what the religious leaders of Jesus's day, here's what they did. They came up with a bunch of extra rules on how to remember the Sabbath day, how to not work on the Sabbath day. They came up with all these extra rules that were not found in Holy Scripture to make sure that they would not break the fourth commandment. And in this way, they actually broke the very spirit of this sweet and wonderful command to rest and worship because they're trying to follow the letter of the law in a precise way. So look at what they do to Jesus' disciples. Chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry. Oh, they're starving. And they began to pluck heads of grain and eat. Oh, no. They're harvesting. They're working. They're reaching out and taking grain from the stalk there, and they're sifting it in their hands, and they're eating. They're working. This is wrong. They're not allowed to do that on the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees saw what they were doing, and they said to him, "Look, behold, look at what your boys are doing. Your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. They're harvesting. You can't be working that way." Well, of course, all of us should look at that and say that's ridiculous. They're not harvesting. They're just reaching out their hand and plucking from a little bit of the grain for them to eat and putting it in their mouth. What kind of work is that? And so Jesus said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence." That's the bread that they would put inside the holy or inside the tabernacle. Uh, Inside, they would put the the table on top of the table of showbread. They would bake 12 loaves of bread there. And so David, there's a story of where he goes in there as he's running from Saul. He goes in there, and the priest gives David and all the men that were with him bread from this table of showbread. And it was not lawful for him to eat it. It was only for the priests to eat it, for those who were with him. But it's only for the priests. David should not have ate it. And yet, the story seems to be telling us that that was okay for King David to do it. This was preserving the life. Oh, this was merciful. This was a good thing to do. This was going to help David stay alive, the king of Israel. Verse 5, or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath, the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? The priests are inside and outside working on the Sabbath, and yet they are guiltless. So you've got to understand, what's the purpose of the Sabbath commandment? It was so that it was made for us. The man was not made for the Sabbath was made for us. We are to have a day where we rest and we worship and we dedicate it unto the Lord. Now, many of you know my own personal kind of conviction is that the Lord's Day, the first day of the week now under the new covenant, that for us is that day that we should set aside to rest and worship. How exactly you go about doing that is up to you. And if you can, in any way, if you can, find a way in your employment not to be working on that first day of the week, I think you should do that to the best you have. Now you have all kinds of situations on why you would be working or doing different things, and But I don't want us to get into that, because when you start looking at the minutia of how to celebrate the Lord's Day, or in the Old Testament, how to celebrate the Sabbath day, you are really missing the mark. Because there's what Jesus says. He says, I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. You see, it's all about understanding the purpose of the command. The command was for us to worship God, the Sabbath in particular, to worship God and to rest and relax, take a break. Why would you not want to take that from the Lord if He's saying that to you? Otherwise, you're making it just all about this sacrificial service, and you're not being merciful to other people. You're just being super judgmental and weird about it. And then he says, if you knew what that means, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He gets to determine how we operate in the Sabbath day. And actually, this is even one of those verses that I would take to even show to us that when it comes to the moral law, the Sabbath moves from Saturday to the Lord's Day, to the first day of the week, when He rose from the dead, because He's the Lord of the Sabbath, and He gets to determine how this Sabbath day, how this rest day is celebrated, and even when it will be celebrated. But again, you do it under your own conscience. I think the Baptist Faith and Message puts it down in a wonderful way. It avoids the word Sabbath, but it does talk about the Lord's Day, and that we should have that day as a special day, but that we observe it according to our own consciences. Just, you want to make sure that the Lord's Day is a special day, however you make it special, that you rest as much as you can, rest and put some things aside, and make sure that you focus on the Lord. Let's look at the journal entry here. Scriptural insight is God desires mercy, not rigid sacrificial obedience. He wants you to be nice and merciful to other people, and even merciful to yourself, right? The prayer, help me to not be tied up by rules not laid down by you. The Israelites and the Jewish leaders came up with extra rules about the Sabbath that were not laid down by Jesus, or not laid down by God. We must make sure that we are obeying God's rules and not our own rules that we have created. It gets us into so much trouble when we do that. And then here is the command to obey. I think you must ask yourself, is there a way that you have been following the letter of the law and have forgotten the spirit of the law? You're doing it exactly right, but you're really not embracing the purpose for which it was actually created. I pray that's been a blessing to you. I'll see you in the next video.